Today is Thursday, April the 28th, 2022. Coming to you with the devotional from heartofashepherd.com. And the title today is Jeremiah Remembered and Rewarded. Our scripture reading is Jeremiah chapter 40. Now, as foretold by the prophets, God's judgment was consummated against Judah, and Jerusalem now laid in ruins. With the arrest of King Zedekiah, the slaying of his sons, it appeared that all was lost, and it was, for a period of 70 months. And yet God never forsook his people. Now, in chapter 40 and verse 1, only a remnant survived the fall of Jerusalem, and Babylon's army had gathered them in chains at Ramah, where they were taken to Babylon. Now, Jeremiah in Lamentations writes a great lamentation regarding Ramah. But the prophetic implication of that place would later be observed by the writer of the Gospel of Matthew when he wrote Matthew 2 and 17 through 18. Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by Jeremy and Jeremiah the prophet, saying, In Ramah was there a voice heard, lamentation and weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and would not be comforted, because they are not. Now notice with me as you come back to Jeremiah chapter 40, that in Jeremiah chapter 39, contrary to Nebuchadnezzar's orders, somehow Jeremiah had been gathered up and numbered among those whom we find in verse 1 of chapter 40 in chains. Now, the captain of the guard named Nebuzaradan intervened and took Jeremiah and said unto him, The Lord thy God hath pronounced this evil, this judgment upon this place. Well, Nebuzaradan was aware Jeremiah had warned his people their sins against the Lord would be the cause for Jerusalem's destruction. In verses 4 and 5, in an extraordinary act of respect, Nebuzaradan set Jeremiah at liberty and gave him the opportunity to go to Babylon in peace and under his protection, or remain in Judah and serve the remnant that would remain in the land. Well, Jeremiah chose to remain with his people. In verse 6, and Nebuzaradan provided the prophet with a parting gift. Now, Nebuchadnezzar had installed a Jew named Gedaliah, who was to serve the interests of Babylon and ruled Judah, in verse 5, as its governor. Now, hearing Gedaliah was a governor, some of the factions that had fled Judah began returning in verse 7, and among them were 5 men who are named in verse 8. Now, named among the 5 was Ishmael, who, according to Jeremiah 41 and verse 1, was of the seed royal, and so was some distant kin of David, perhaps even felt that he was, by right and title, should be the governor of Judah. Well, Gedaliah, in verse 10, appealed to Ishmael and his companions, encouraged them, lay down your weapons and go harvest, in verse 10, the land. And still, as we read in verses 11 and 12, there were other Jews that had been scattered among the nations. They too returned to Judah, and they began rebuilding their lives. Well, some who returned to farming. Some learned there was a plot to kill Gedaliah. And leaving their fields, they came to the governor and asking him regarding Baalis, the king of the Ammonites, has sent Ishmael, they said, the son of Nathaniel, to slay thee. Well, Gedaliah, in verse 14, refused to believe the evil report, and he dismissed Johanan's offer to slay Ishmael. In verse 15, he feared Gedaliah, Johanan did, his death would give cause for the people once again to be scattered, and the remnant in Judah to perish. But Gedaliah failed to foresee the evil and dismissed the men who came to him, accusing them of speaking falsely of Ishmael. Well, a closing thought for this brief devotional. Our next devotional in Jeremiah chapter 41 will continue the plot to slay Gedaliah. Tragically, that good man's failure to discern his friends from his enemies would cost the governor his life. I hope you'll follow me tomorrow as we continue the study of the life after the destruction of Jerusalem. God bless and have a good day. Bye-bye.